Hi everyone, let me tell you about the time I almost died. I know that is a super common, super clickbait title that YouTubers post, and then they talk about how a car whizzed past them at the last second, and if it had been 5 minutes earlier they would have died, and you sort of go, that it's not really near death though, is it? Like, it's a scary experience, and it's something that, I guess can have formation, but sometimes you just watch them and go, yeah, that's a little bit not quite right. When I say that, I mean that if I hadn't had intervention at the time that I had, I probably wouldn't be here today. I've had plenty of the first sort as well. There was a time when my husband and I decided to try and teach my older brother how to drive, and he nearly killed us all. I've had so many instances of near misses and close calls that aren't even funny, but this one was one where, like I said, without intervention at the time that I got it, I probably wouldn't be here today. Now, I'm sure if you've watched any of my stuff up till now, or if you follow me anywhere, you would have seen that obviously I've had lots of problems with endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, and adenomyosis and fibroids, and had a number of surgeries to help with those issues. The first surgery was an emergency surgery, or what they classed as an emergency surgery, and they were trying to just remove the ovary cyst, but during it I started to bleed out and they had to remove the whole ovary. But other than that, nothing went wrong. It was a pretty straightforward surgery. I woke up, there was no real problems, and even the fact that they had to remove the whole ovary wasn't really a big drama or a massive risk. I didn't nearly die. I probably could have if I'd kept bleeding and if they'd ignored it, but when you're on the surgery table is the best time for something like that to happen, because they can intervene, because they're literally there at the time. Fast forward, and I had another surgery to try and remove that ovary again because it was causing problems. Basically it broke apart, and some of that part has embedded itself in places it shouldn't be, and for some magical reason, and if only all of my organs were this dedicated to functioning, it still functions even though it's not where it's supposed to be, and it's not, not whole either, but it still does its little thing and makes cysts for me, because yay. Then I had another one to remove my tubes and to get an ablation. Then I had my gastric bypass surgery, and then I had my hysterectomy. Now, this hysterectomy was cut and dry, pretty straightforward. Before I went into the surgery, the doctors were sort of, saying, look, you don't have to go through with the full hysterectomy if you don't want to. And I'm like, dude, take my uterus, take it. I hate the thing. It causes me no end of problems, and I just want it gone. So please don't try this last minute BS. No, don't worry about doing it, kind of thing. And the anesthesiologist I had for it was fantastic. He was really, really good. I'd seen him a couple of weeks earlier to discuss what might have to happen, and he ran through issues that, the typical risk factor of surgery. You might need a blood transfusion, you might need different antibiotics. What happens if we need to do a full opening rather than the laparoscopy? And just all those different sort of factors that he had in there. And, it was just typical sign-off stuff, tick and flick, basically. And went into the surgery, had no real fear. I mean, there's always a little bit of fear when it comes to surgery, because it's surgery. They're opening you up. They're exposing, especially when you're having a hysterectomy and they're having to actually cut things out of your body. There's blood vessels that run into those organs, and there's a risk that, you might start bleeding significantly. But the surgery went fine. Everything was good. They stitched me up. I was back on the ward within about an hour and a half, 2 hours. It wasn't a long surgery or recovery. It was just standard. I didn't feel great, but who feels great when they wake up from surgery? I mean, like I said, someone's just cut you open and pulled stuff out of you. You're not going to feel fantastic. You're going to feel groggy because you're on all sorts of drugs. I had the green clicker for the pain relief, so obviously that was, it helped me be out of pain, but made me not very with it mentally. And it was all good. I was back on the ward. My blood pressure never really picked up. It was pretty low most of the afternoon, and they kept, hourly rounds like they do when you have surgery, for at least for the first, I think it's 12 hours or something. They do it hourly, and then they do it 4 hourly after that until they finally decide that you're ready to go home. And that was all good, except, like I said, my blood pressure never picked up. Come about, I think it was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's a little bit foggy, I had a blood pressure crash. They didn't know why, they didn't know what was happening, but basically my blood pressure dropped. While they were watching it, it was effectively dropping, and that was when I almost died. And I don't say that lightly. I had a crash team around me, which is the most bizarre experience, to have 20 nurses and doctors and everyone all standing around your bed watching and trying to do what they can. I had new IV drains. Even though I had an IV, they were putting extra lines in just to try and get fluids in as fast as possible. I had people stabbing me with all sorts of injections that I don't even know what they were for. I think that they were anticoagulant ones, but I couldn't tell you that for certain. They could have been adrenaline, they could have been anything, I don't know. They sort of don't really explain too much. But my blood pressure was just dropping and dropping and dropping. And like I said, as they watched it, it just went right down. And I think the lowest it got was something like 80/47 or 50 or something crazy low. And they had my legs in the air and they were pumping them, trying to get some sort of, increase in the blood pressure. And even as they were speaking to me, everything just narrowed. The whole room narrowed down. And it was, how people describe going through a tunnel or seeing a tunnel. It was like that. It was like everything just sort of like an old CRT TV where it turns off and then you end up with this little tiny picture. And I had that, and everything was going grey and fuzzy, and I couldn't hear people. It sounded like I was hearing them through a tunnel. And the weirdest thing was I'd just started watching Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which is a fantastic show, by the way, if you haven't seen it. But as I was lying there and as everything was fading and going grey and everything, my brain starts giving me the music to Mad World by Gary Jules. And I'm like, okay. In particular, the chorus where it's like, and the dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. And it was like it was trying to prepare me for what was going to come next. And yeah, it was the weirdest, most bizarre experience I've ever had. And watching this team of people all crowd around my bed and all talk about different ways to sort it and everything was just the most bizarre situation. And I didn't need, obviously, defib or anything like that. It wasn't quite like the movies where they crash team and everyone's working and everyone's doing, something. Most people were there, I think, more as a measure in case they needed to get to that stage. There's obviously some sort of hospital policy about needing to have everyone there when it happens. But yeah, it was a bizarre situation that I don't know, if you've never had it, you probably won't understand, but that narrowing and that tunneling was just, I think that's when I knew that something could be seriously, seriously wrong. Anyway, after that, next few hours, they monitored me every 15 minutes. They monitored my stats just to make sure that things were stable, and nothing ever really got completely stable. But they did get the blood pressure back up to 100/80 or something around there. So it wasn't great, but it wasn't, you're not getting blood to your brain and heart and vital organs like it had been. So yeah, they ended up doing some tests and tested for hemoglobin levels, and they weren't too concerned. They sort of we're trying to decide what to do. Fast forward until about 9 o'clock that night, and they finally did a second test for hemoglobin levels and saw that they had dropped, not significantly. So it showed that there was a leak somewhere, but it wasn't a massive internal leak. It was just a slow leak that was releasing fluids over time. In the time since, and I've been back to do, follow-ups and stuff with the hospital, they revealed that apparently there's massive internal review over my case because they believe that they should have got me back into surgery quicker, because everyone was sort of like taking the risk of, we'll just wait and see. And then by the time they did get me back into surgery, so I had a second surgery that night with the same anesthesiologist, funnily enough. So it was like, funny seeing you here. I didn't think you'd still be here. It's almost 12 hours after I had my first surgery and you're still here and you're going to be the one that's going to keep me asleep for the next couple of hours. But hopefully it had a nap or something at the hospital in the meantime. He definitely confirmed that it was still the same shift. So I don't know whether he did a 24-hour shift or what the go was there. But yeah, it was sort of like, I'm glad to see you because I know that we've run through all the procedures and I trust you and, you're a good guy. But I don't want to see you if you've been here for 12 hours working hard the whole time because you're going to be tired and people who are tired make mistakes. Although in saying that, the first doctors made the mistakes. Obviously, they didn't stitch something up properly or something happened. When I've had my follow-ups with the hospital, it's actually been with the doctor that did the surgery. And she was talking in a way that I didn't particularly like, but I'm not going to lodge complaints or anything because it's just not worth it. But she was sort of saying that when they finished up the first surgery, they were patting themselves on the back about how easy it was and, having this big old celebration because it was so simple and so easy. But obviously they'd forgotten to cauterize something properly or stitch something properly. And so there was this leak. When I went back in for my second surgery, they removed a couple of litres of blood and ooze from my abdomen, and they also gave me pints of blood. So I've officially now had a transfusion, which is something I've never been able to say before, and that does give me pause to actually want to go and give blood, but I need to get over my fear of needles to do that, which is a stupid fear considering how many times I've been stuck, and I've been stuck in the worst ways, and I've had to have blood drawn out of my knuckle because there was no veins anywhere else because of how long I'd been on nil by mouth and stuff during different times in the hospital. I've had so many horror stories from the hospital that it would turn most people off. But what can you do? Like, if you need to be there, you need to be there, and stressing about them needing to stick you somewhere else, it's just not something that I stress about these days. It's really bizarre. It's almost like my GP for a long time said that she thinks I have PTSD from my first experience in the hospital. And she's probably correct because now every time I need to go in, I just go numb. Like, it's just like, whatever you need to do, wherever you need to go, just get me out of here as quickly as possible. That's all I care about, is getting out the door as quick as I can. Even when I had my gastric bypass, I was supposed to be in there for 3 nights and I was only in there for 2. Mostly because I was doing well. They wouldn't have let me go if I was not responding well or anything like that. But I was just like, no, I'm ready to get out of here. Like, it's just the worst situation being in the hospital. Hospital food isn't as bad as people make it out to be, but just the constant interruptions, especially at night when you're trying to sleep, not being in your own bed, having people who are next to you. And that was also the situation where I had my nightmare nurse, which I've posted a previous video about that. So having that situation just made me not want to be there any longer. And this one, it was, like I said, it was an okay surgery. The second surgery, once it was done, I recovered fine. I started to bounce back, and then I was ready to get out of the hospital as soon as I could after that. Although I did have some issues with the shy bladder that made it a bit harder and made it take a bit longer than it was supposed to. And there was question marks over whether I'd be going home or not, or what would be happening because of that, but it all ended up resolving itself. So that's my little story about the time I almost died, how weird it was to go through that experience. Have anyone else been through something like that? I'd love to know your stories, hear what happened with you, and whether you had your brain offering you the weirdest stimulus at that exact time. I definitely didn't have my life flash before my eyes. It was just a song playing in the background. That, yeah, very weird. Anyway, if you can, give me a comment down below. Tell me your stories. Tell me anything else you'd like to hear about, if you want an elaboration on anything that I said in this video. Yeah, otherwise, if you like this video, give it a like. If you want to subscribe, please do subscribe. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.